Okay, so, wow, I'm really loud. For our last presentation of the day, we have Alice Kaltenmark. Alice is a recognized business resiliency expert who contributes as a resilience thought leader, mentor, and evangelist.
A what?
Alice's professional experience spans over 20 years in business continuity and disaster recovery in the information solutions industry and over 40 years of IT. So you started when you were 4.
Yeah.
Okay. She leads the Global Resiliency ITDR Governance Program for the LexisNexis Legal and Professional Division of RELIX and leads the LexisNexis Infrastructure and Technology Operations Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Program. Alice chairs the RELIX Technical Resiliency Working Group setting and guiding TR requirements and best practices for RELIX businesses. Alice serves as the BCI USA chapter past president and the treasurer and past president for Continuity Professionals of Ohio, a regional nonprofit. Yeah, that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Alice has been with LexisNexis for 40 years. Alice began her career as a software engineer and quickly advanced into management. Since beginning her management career in 1989, she has led many organizations spanning the spectrum from software development, release management, development support, daily operations, technology introduction, and culminating in her current role in technical resilience, governance, and management. Alice, okay. Yeah, so we welcome Alice, and we're happy to hear what you have to share today.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. You know, it's hard to hear somebody. Oh, yeah, that probably would be good. No, I've been told I really never need a mic. It just does help sometimes. So let me get this on. How's that? Is that okay? All right. While I heard all about my day job and so forth, I'm actually here on behalf of BCI. And so I'm going to be delivering the BCI Horizon Scan report. This is the report that was tailored for the Americas. It was launched a couple of months ago. And we're going to go through a lot of information, a lot of data, so it can be very dry. But, and I'm going to do my best to cover the detail. But before I get into a lot of detail about the report itself, I would highly encourage you to go out onto the BCI website and download the report. It will take you a while to read it. It is about 68 pages long, lots of pictures, lots of graphs, but the narrative that is in the report is really good. I tried my best to try and read it yesterday in its entirety. I only got about a third of the way through because there's a lot to absorb. So I'm going to do my best to deliver the highlights from the report, but I encourage you to go download it yourself and read it. A lot of what you've heard today, from when we started off with Lacey talking to us about cyber, then we went into a cyber exercise, and then getting into really understanding what is ESG, because I know I didn't say as much as I normally do through a session, but I learned a lot by listening to what Tracy shared with us. That was really eye-opening to me, because what I had thought ESG was before was basically dealing with our environmental friends wants to keep the world sustainable, and realizing that no, it's more than that. There's a lot more than that to it. So it's really understanding a lot of that. But what we were hearing about were the trends. Where are we going? What are we doing? What is happening in our industry? What's that risk landscape? That's what the Horizon Scan report is about. It's about saying, okay, it surveys business continuity risk professionals across the globe. So this is a survey that is sent out to same distribution from BCI every year. And we have new entrants every year that respond to it. And in fact, here's a little bit of data about who's responding. We had 424 respondents from 65 countries. There were 11 interviews conducted with some of the respondents to dive deeper into the data, and represented 24 different sectors of industries. But as we go through this, you're going to see it lines up with what the trends were that Tracy was sharing, talking about that knock-on effect of cyber incidents and climate change incidents and the fact that we're dealing with not just one incident at a time, we were dealing with many incidents. And I don't even want to number the types of incidents that we're dealing with because every day is different. Every moment of every day is different. But it's having a good understanding of what are the threats out there on the horizon, what is top of mind, where's the C-suite saying is there threats, where are the people in our industry that do what we do day in and day out, where do they see the threats? So that's where the value of the Rise and Stand report comes into. It is a quotable product that you can use as more information, like the World Economic Forum and these other resources. It's another resource to use to help prove your point when you talk with your leadership and trying to say, well, what's the so what? Why do I care? This is why you care. All right. Just to the diverse range of people. So I had to use my machine because I need my speaker notes. And I didn't print anything because I was trying to be environmentally friendly and not use up all that paper. 50% of the respondents were from Europe. 22% of the respondents were from the Americas. 18% from Asia Pac. 5% from Africa and 5% from the Middle East. I bring that up not only so that you understand this truly is a diverse group of respondents. So you're getting the information from a wide range of perspectives. But one of the things that people have been asking, and I've been one of those people asking, why isn't the BCI saying more about Ukraine and the conflict and what's happening there? Why is the BCI, the Business Continuity Institute, being silent? We brought this question up in the board meeting last week, and David Thorpe, who is the executive director of the BCI, shared with us that while we in the U.S., they in the UK, and many of the countries in Western Europe have an opinion and have pretty much a united stance about the conflict. We have many members in other countries in the globe that have a totally different view. So while the BCI, in my mind, I said, I likened it a bit to Switzerland. We're neutral. So we have to be careful what we say and what we don't say. So we can talk about it within our local groups, but the BCI itself can't go out because we have to be sensitive to the fact that we have members in other parts of the globe who have a totally different opinion than what we do about what's happening. So I just wanted to say that to you so that if you're like, well, why aren't they saying something? This is why. And this is also why you may have the same response for other organizations. DRI is another one. They have a global membership. They have some of the same constraints, although they are more US based. They have a little bit more freedom in that space. Other organizations aren't. But it also is something to take into consideration as we're doing business with our customers that are around the globe. While we can say we stand with Ukraine, which my company says we stand with Ukraine, we have customers though that don't. So we have to be careful that we don't alienate our customer base as well. So, yes, Tracy.
We have the same experience, and we encourage the customer forums. We encourage the safe space to talk.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to talk, and just to share, as a community. The biggest thing that I learned was such a sensitive situation that they had, a public statement, and that was it. They couldn't speak outside public statement. even to like others in their industry. So when it comes to politics and things of that nature, especially when it's across different countries.
It's being sensitive to it, respect that there are other viewpoints. It gets into a lot of, we could touch all kinds of tangents, but it's good to know. Yes.
BCI talk about that though from a threat, like obviously global impact, supply chain impact, all that kind of stuff.
We can speak to it from an impact to business. There is conflict within an area, and what is that, and how do you respond? How do you prepare? South Africa, there has been a lot of civil unrest in South Africa. We can't speak to the conflict itself, but we can speak to the impact of businesses because of it, the impacts to the supply chain. And that was one of the other key findings through the report was the supply chain impact and the pervasiveness of that, and how COVID identified a lot, but this last year has been, if your eyes weren't already open, they're really open now as to how interconnected the world is. So the report is split up into 3 different sections. It's split up into the last 12 months, the current situation, and the next 12 months. So that's typically how the report is done over at the information that is gathered. And it looks at incidents so the past 12 months, it asks a whole series of questions about incidents that have affected organizations in the past 12 months and those that affect them in the future. So, just what I said, that I was reading my slide. But the other key note in here is, when did this survey go out? So it's important to know that the 2020 Horizon Scan report closed, the questionnaire closed the day before COVID was announced. So the 2020 Horizon Scan report had an non-occupational infectious disease way down on the Horizon Scan list. Well, guess what? The world changed. So the conversations were different. Fast forward, this year's report was actually published, and I've got the detail coming up, but basically the survey closed right before conflict began in earnest. So it also, that you'll see some differences where things you would have expected to see it higher on the list. It's the timing of when the survey closed.
Can I make a suggestion to start closing it in March instead of February?
Well, then next year it's all going to happen in April.
Wasn't in January, so the spring is a little less hectic.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So, what were the top 3 disruptions in 2021? That, again, because of when it hit, it was all before. It was all focused primarily around COVID-related incidents. Still, the non-occupational disease being the #1 threat, or the #1 incident that we had to deal with, the issues arising from remote working, the new workplace environment, because that's real, but we're still dealing with those issues, and then travel restrictions. Travel restrictions are still hitting as hard as our issues we're dealing with.
Does travel restrictions take into account, like, does that aggregate like supply chain disruptions with the ability to turn like goods?
It plays into that. It's not only your staff, but it's just in general travel restrictions. Yeah, because it's one of those ripple effects again, right? It's restricting your staff from moving around. It's restricting your staff from being able to come into the office, et cetera, and so forth. Right. So obviously COVID dominated disruptions in 21. And let's see. And a lot of the practitioners spoke to how they're still spent the years cleaning, mopping up from COVID. And the other key thing that kept coming up, and this is the recurring theme throughout the report, is dealing with, I gotta get the right terms, double and triple whammy events. You got to realize the person that writes this report is British, so you're getting some UK colloquialisms in there. Rachel Elliott, she's a gem. But particularly in places such as Australia, is Australia was dealing not only with extremely strict COVID regulations and restrictions, but then they had major wildfires. They had a few other things going on at the same time, but again, and then add cyber onto this, it's just, everything is just getting out of control. So, and let's see. Okay, I'm not going to get into a lot of this detail. I am going to I shared a PDF before with you, Zach. I'll share the actual PowerPoint later, because so that everybody can see the speaker notes, because it is the clip notes version of the report. So looking at, I don't know how to get rid of that thing at the top. It's the IT and telecom outage is in the 8th position for disruptions faced by organizations in 2021. So in the past 12 months, these are the top 12 occurring incidents. And then the associated impact, then giving you an actual risk index. So not just looking at the number of occurrences. What?
Forgot to lose your mic.
Oh, thank you. Okay. That would have been not pretty. So it's non-occupational disease, in other words, pandemic, 9.7 times that it occurred. This is an aggregate number. The impact was assessed at 2.5, which is the highest end of the impact scale that's used in the scale, and that translated to a risk index of 24.5. So it was a leaderboard. But as you go down, next was issues arising from remote working, then travel restrictions, then health incident, not transmissible disease such as COVID, but occupational disease, reportable occupation, a bunch of other stuff. I don't need to read all this to you, but one key thing in there is mental issues, mental health issues. That was the number 4 impact from the past 12 months. Next, number 5 slot is lack of key talent and skills. That is hitting all of us, is lack finding the talent, because the talent's left. To that point, we were talking about jobs before, right? I, for one, won't even look at a job posting if it's not allowed to be remote, because I, for one, have no desire whatsoever to ever work in an office again. I don't have to. So I would only, and I also am not going to move. I'll admit it, I'm 60 years old and I don't want to leave my home. It's my home. I'm not 30 something where picking up and going is okay. So, and I know I'm not alone, but this is the other thing that's happening. That's just my story. But the story changes as you go around to, everybody else has their own different perspective. But that lack of talent is, it's easier to move around. It's easier to move different companies, as well as the skills that are needed. The skills we need today are different than the skills we needed 5 years ago. The technology skills are paramount. With having a remote workforce, you have got to have that solid IT infrastructure. And by the way, that IT infrastructure has changed dramatically from what it was 10 years and 5 years ago. So that getting those skills, they're not as readily available as they may have been in years past, because we're having a hard time attracting the young generation into these skills, into these professions. So it's, we talked about getting into the colleges, and that's that feeder for CPO members. That's important because we need to be talking to the next generation and getting them prepped so that we have the skills that we need to keep us going forward. I'm getting diverging off the topic, but safety and supply chain disruption was here. IT telecom outage gets up there, but not as high as you would think. But that changes over time. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Then cyber attack, lone attacker, or active shooter incident. It's a little bit farther down on the list. I think if we took the survey today, the Americas response would be different. And it is actually, when you look at the Americas data, that was higher up in the list because we've had more incidents of active shooter events. Extreme weather events it was at number 11. Again, if you took the survey today, it would rise up. So as you look ahead in the future, that actually goes up. Regulatory changes always ends up in the middle somewhere. In the bottom 11, don't ignore the bottom 11 because there's a lot of stuff here to look at. So again, this is the last 12 months, 2021. Natural resources shortage, higher cost of borrowing, exchange rate volatility, energy price shock, political change. Goes on down. Critical infrastructure failure was at 21, with natural disasters at 22, and enforcement by regulator at 23. And the last thing on the list is product safety recall, which is hitting me today because I got to clear my shelves of Jif. But let's see. But like I said, don't ignore the ones at the bottom because you look at that critical infrastructure, that is a prime target for cyber attack. And you hit that critical infrastructure, that's going to take out our ability to work from anywhere, quite honestly, and to be able to continue to operate. So things that we tend to take for granted because it's always there, but it's aging. And expect to see more instances occurring in those spaces. This is hard to read. I'm not going to try and show it to you, but this is trying to highlight the difference of impact of COVID-19 continue to dominate, just giving it to you in a more of a scatter chart in a quadrant. Look at the report, you can read it. I'm not going to try and read it to you now. This is the Americas data showing that it's very similar to the global data. So we're tracking pretty close as far as what happened to us over the past 12 months, where we're going in the next 12 months. Although we did have more frequency of IT telecom outage. This next slide, I'm sorry guys, I don't know how to get rid of that top screen.
You click off of it already.
No. I think it's because I'm using this. I don't know. It's
Hit that new share at the top.
Yeah, if you go all the way up to the top, there's a little bar that says you are sharing. There's a little arrow right to the left, down and a little bit over to the left. A little arrow, like a little.
Oh yeah, that little.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. Thank you. See, awesome. Tech it. I have my tech expert in the room. All right. COVID-19 has primary disruptor for 36% of organizations, but for 2/3 it wasn't. So this is looking the year past. Does that surprise you to see that? But all these things happened, but this is the one that was the biggest impact. It's quite interesting to see. It's such a huge change. It's just it was a surprising finding that 2/3 of the organizations reported that other incidents were their most major event over the past year. So actually, that was another thing. That this was asking what was your most impactful. Well, 36% said this, 64% said no, something else was more impactful to me than COVID-19. So the message there is that it's here to stay. We're used to it. It's not. We've dealt with it. It's everything else that we're dealing with is what that was talking about. But if you see, IT and telecom outage was at 12.6%. So we are definitely more vulnerable, especially with a more remote workforce. If Comcast goes down, if Spectrum goes down, AT&T goes down, you name your provider, you've got a major hit and people's ability to get the job done. So what are you doing about that? Are you planning for 2 and 3 different options for your staff. You know, I know mine is a hotspot on my cell phone. That's my backup plan. But what about when we had the power outages in Texas it was just last year in February, but major freeze. And they even had one of the stories that's told in the report is they had one company in Texas-based companies looking at all their senior leaders putting in generators at their homes because they had senior leaders that were stuck in the house because the cars, which was their backup power source for their laptops, you know, because that's what mine is, by the way. I'll go turn on my car, plug my laptop in, and I can have juice, right? Their cars were frozen shut in the garage because power was out, so they had no heat. So the garage door was frozen shut. So even if you had the manual release, you were sunk. So they were looking at, you know, putting in generators, home generators in key staff's homes. Other companies were looking at for their other critical staff, putting in 2 ISP providers into their home, 2 different blankets, things that we did for our data centers, that we did for our campuses. Now looking at, okay, if you have critical staff, they're home based, now we have to take that and extend it out to their homes. Now that is an expense. And that makes that just makes my brain hurt. Sorry, it just makes my brain hurt. All right, and now I'm not gonna work. Okay, fine. There we go. Okay, risk and threat assessment, the next 12 months. So what does it look like going forward? So while we have COVID still dominating at 7 with the risk score of 7.8, cyber attack and data breach came in at number 2 with travel restrictions still on there coming in at 3, because that does impact supply chain. It impacts everything else. But again, this was taken before the Ukraine incident started. There was rumors, but it hadn't started yet. I would expect that would look different now. Supply chain impacts would be higher. And I would say that actually cyber would be the number 1. I mean, we spent our whole morning talking about cyber. Jody and I spent our whole last year dealing with cyber and ransomware and being prepared. And we're not alone. We're all dealing with this, and because we have to. It's reality today. So it's that disconnect. Part of that is the disconnect that happens with what the timing of when the report is. So that's why we have to come back into the interviews and actually bring it relevant and look at this. So what, other than the facts I already raised, do you see surprises there? Would you have expected it to be different? I don't, sort of, it looks about right.
I would have expected it to be different, but just because most of the time.
But I think too, with travel restrictions, like, you know, with lots of supply chain down there.
Yeah.
It's so fantastic. I think sensing covers that,
Yeah, travel restrictions does to a point, and not completely. I think the cyber definitely. I mean, one of my biggest concerns is AWS goes down and Microsoft goes down. Microsoft goes down, we are hurting that. And it highlights, okay, well, because I'm looking at it, well, Active Directory, yeah, we still have it running on-prem, but we're in the process of moving it to Azure Active Directory. So I've just moved the problem. Yeah, it's not within my walls, but it's still there. Now it's in the walls of Microsoft, and if they take an outage, and by the way, they do not share their business continuity plan. They do not share their test results.
Right. Just found that out.
I'm dealing with Amazon on this right now.
That should change if and when Fora goes into effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, it's getting companies like that are critical. They are now where the utility providers have been our key things. Now it's the Amazons, it's the Microsofts, it's the Googles. These major internet services providers or central hubs run the world. I mean, the whole world runs off of it. So let's see, I'm going to see what else. what other points that were on here? Okay, we already talked about that. Let's see, it's like we're gonna work now. Yes, okay. All right, so looking ahead, still looking at, okay, what do we need? We need to take a broader approach to risk planning. What were we just hearing about from Tracy, right? It's like you can't just be singularly focused on these set of risks. You've got to look at this broader spectrum because any one of these and several of these can hit you at any point in time. But looking out at that broader view, so we already talked about the fact that like COVID's still at the top. Then you got cyber, travel, issues arising from the remote working, because that's part of what we were talking about, interconnected with all of this. IT telecom outage, extreme weather events. That's actually, in my mind, should actually be up like maybe number one because of the frequency and severity and the fact that they're no longer localized. The major weather events are doing sweeping. I mean, you look at just any recent news report, just this last weekend, storms that ran through, not only went through all of the Midwest, through the, through the plains, through, the heartland of Ohio, all the way to the East Coast. But it changed as it moved through and the dynamics and the impacts were different. So extreme weather is just more frequent and more severe, longer lasting. Critical infrastructure failure did move up. Regulatory changes, it's now getting up higher. DORA, prime example. That was part of what was referenced in some of the interview notes. DORA is going to be a major change. The other thing that's interesting is that, and Tracy touched on this earlier too, a lot of these types of regulations start in the UK or Europe, the EU, and then they find their way to the US. It takes some different shape because of course we have to do it our way. And it usually starts in California and then it goes to, I'm just being a little facetious.
You're not wrong, that's exactly how it happens.
But it's those regulatory changes are the things that really get us hard. So what we need to be doing, part of that, looking at that risk and resilience profile is looking at, okay, what's on the horizon, what's going to be coming at us, and be ready for it before it hits us. Because we're not going to have time to react. If you haven't already thought about it and dealt with it and have a plan, you're SOL. Health incident, mental health gets lumped into this health incident, but mental health is really critical. I'm thankful that I work for a company that recognizes that. Not all companies do. And we've all reacted to working from home differently. You've got me, I'm the cheerleader, I love it, right? But I'm also not dealing with littles. I'm older, I'm an empty nester. I love it, by the way. However, if I was having to do with what my daughter-in-law has to do with having 3 children at home and helping them do homeschool and this all at the same time, I would have had a totally different view. Please let me come to the office. Please let me come to the office so I have my break, which was the way I was when I had littles at home. It's like, I wanted to go to the office because it got me out of that environment into another environment. So that mental health is huge. Supply chain disruption, now we got the bottom. Supply chain disruptions at 11, but again, that's bumping up. Thankfully, I don't need formula today, but what you can't see on the number 12 is introduction of new technology, the infrastructure of things, artificial intelligence, and big data. It's interesting. I'm glad it's still on the threat landscape, but you don't realize how prevalent that is in your day-to-day life. It's happening whether you realize it or not. You need to be aware of it, and your business needs to be aware of it and don't take it, oh, that's just the techie thing. I don't know if you knew this, but the technology that allows you to change your background when you're on video, that's AI driven. That's how it's done. It's artificial intelligence for the computer to figure out what's you versus what's the background and separate that. So it's part of our day-to-day lives. It's part AI drives your ability to do voice commands into your remote, so you can be a true couch potato and be able to run your TV. I know. The bottom half, natural disaster, still, in the middle of the pack, but it's there. But lone attacker, active shooter has bumped up. Safety incidents is right in the middle of the pack. And one of the things that they mentioned in the report, why safety incidents? Part of the challenge here is that we've got people, because of the revolving door of staff leaving and coming back. A lot of our older people said, I'm done with this. I'm going to retire. I'm done. I don't have to deal with this rat race anymore. Well, they were the ones that were trained how to do the stuff. And you've got younger ones coming in and people pitch hitting and trying to, you've got secure people doing jobs, and safety incidents are happening. Think about, we're in a restaurant venue right now. Think about how this industry's been hit so hard. And you've got a lot of people that are coming in and doing serving that have never served before. Well, if you don't know how to do it the right way so that you can keep from injuring yourself, that's just a example here right in front of us. Interruption to utility supply, we've lived it, we deal with it. The enforcement of the regulators, political change, political violence, civil unrest is at number 20. Again, like we said, timing of when the survey was taken, that would be higher in the list. Higher cost of borrowing is another one that would be up now. Why do you care? That is a risk, because if you have to infuse capital, you have to borrow capital to keep your business running, or you need additional funds to pay your payroll until the cash flow gets back on sync. That makes a difference. And natural resources shortages down here at the bottom. Product safety recall still there. And that's from the consumer perspective as well as from the provider's perspective, the company, the seller of the product. Anything in there that makes you kind of do a head tilt? Okay. Again, eye chart is interesting if you can get up and actually read it. It's too difficult to try and read it, so you can look at it later on file. But actually in the report, you can actually see this where it expands out what the scatter chart looks at. But just showing it pictorially with the risk rating of where things fall on the assessment. America's similar to the global perspective. Natural disasters are more frequent in the Americas, the extreme weather events, and lack of talent and key skills, again, a lot more of an issue in the US than they are globally. Practitioners better consider the broader risk landscape when thinking longer term. Again, it's a general theme of what we've been talking about here today. Cybersecurity came in at 85%. Yeah. But then followed right behind it with climate risk, pandemic, and then technology and telecom failure. So look here, 50% each at climate and pandemic, then followed by 35% on technology and telecoms failure. So yes, you've got to continue to look at that complete landscape. You can't just focus on a couple of them. You've got to take it all in to account and keep it in perspective, keep the data in context. What does it mean to you, to your business? I saw a post on that actually from our chief CISO for Relics. He put a post out on LinkedIn recently, and it was talking about data is data until you put it in context. And you need to make sure that you've got the data in context before you start making your decisions. Okay, consequences of disruptions. Mental health should remain a focus, but supply chain disruption enters top 5 this year. So that was a change, but also just showing this is a reflection of what's happened to us globally. Loss of productivity is 62.1% of the top 5 impacts. Staff loss or displacement. And the bottom is loss of revenue and supply chain disruption. So the impacts are significant of all these different things that are happening, how are they impacting businesses? Benchmarking business continuity. So this is, I'm going to not dwell on this too much, but it's just talking about leveraging ISO standards and benchmarking. Where is your company versus, your suppliers, et cetera. 22301 still holds true as the standard that most companies align with. However, 22316 is rising in popularity. That is the organization resilience standard. I just sat on the final meeting to put out the new disc for 22361. It is a new crisis management standard. As you can tell, I'm participating with ISO standards and part of the technical group. And the thing is we're keeping up with what's happening, trying to update the standards to reflect reality today. Leading indicators is one of the terms that you're going to start saying in the standards now. Yeah, Brian.
What's the difference between 22316 and 22301? Because could you do an entire program just based off 22316, or?
You could, however, you can't certify to it. The only reason is that there's not auditing terms that are certifying to 22316, but you can certify to 22301. So I think it's a matter of time. But so the results are coming back. It's waffling different places depending on who you are, which company does, and so forth, as to whether you think being certified is a good thing or not. The companies that are aligning to 22316, number one, don't have to certify. There's a lot of other things, but it's talks more about organizational resilience, and it's more the holistic integration of risk and resilience, and looking at the fuller spectrum. So it's still talking about a management standard. It's still a management standard, a bit, a process management standard. I'm trying to think of the right terms, but 22301 still is the leading one. One of the key things of why do you want to be certified here is it's into when you're doing your supply chain resilience governance. One of the things is, if I know if a company has achieved 22301 certification, I know the basics of what they have there, what they have in place. And to maintain that standard, it means you've been audited by an independent party to say that, yes, it's not just a check the box exercise, it's real. So I use that within my own supplier resilience program to say, okay, if you are certified to 22301, 27001, 31005, let's just keep on going with all the numbers. But the various standards, manufacturing, it's going to be ISO 9001 because of the quality standards. So they do matter. ISO standards, it's a way of benchmarking yourself against other industries, other companies. So the question here is dealing with how does your program relate to 22301? Are you aligned with the standard? Are you certified to the standard? Do you care? Do you don't care? So those were the questions that are asked. So less are certifying to the 22301, but those that are using it as the framework for their programs is rising. It aids organization resilience, but wider benefit to the stakeholders. So again, it's more external than it is internal. It gives you a framework to work around. It's a solid standard. But it does, it helps you in communicating what you have to others. So that's where a lot of the value comes from it. One of the things in this matter, this is true in my company, it helps to reduce insurance costs. Because in our business resilience, our business insurance firm puts a lot of stock in that, and then we reduced our premiums significantly because we are certified. And the other key thing is ensuring alignment with industry peers. It's not an interpretation of terms. There's a benchmark that you're measuring against. I highly recommend it. It does help. You don't have to certify to it, but aligning with the framework does make a difference. And I know Fusion does. I know, many of the software tools out there stay in tune with what's happening with the standard and align with it accordingly.
It's usually a line item in every RFP we get.
Yep.
Is how can you help us align ties to the 22 group? Whether or not they're certified or not, global organizations, they want that assurance. And
Yeah.
like you said, it sets the benchmark for the conversation we're gonna have.
Exactly. Yeah, so you're talking apples to apples, et cetera. Okay, those not certifying report no business requirement and or drive for management. So yeah, if nobody's pushing me to do it, why am I going to go through the pain and agony and cost, right? But in our company, we actually came to the conclusion it's actually a cost avoidance because the volume of customer inquiries that we get is insane. By being able to show here's our business resilience statement, here's our certificate, and 95% of the inquiries that come in, we're done. We don't have to go through all the hassle of going through and answering every one of those questions. So, less are certifying, but those using it as framework is rising. These are some of the other standards that are popular and used in this space. I said 27,001, the information security management. It says, do you have business continuity? But it doesn't go much deeper than that. So that's why I don't take that alone. 31,000 is risk management standard. 9,001 is quality. 22,316 organizational resilience. NIST framework is information security. That's popular in the US. COSO framework, internal control. ISO 45,001 is health and safety. 14,001 is environmental management. 22,320 is incident response. That's a popular one that comes in as a benchmarking tool. And then COBIT for information technology. That goes into really down deep for IT. Okay, benchmarking longer term trend analysis. You guys can read this. I'm not going to go into this detail. This is getting to the boring stage. What's interesting, though, conference and event attendance rises by 20 percentage points as the world opens up. Hope to see that. Yeah? Hi. Yeah, we're here. Social media monitoring is, we were talking earlier, how do you predict trends, what's out there? So internal risk and threat assessment, external reports, industry insights like this, the World Economic Forum, et cetera. Risk registers, participation in conferences and events like this, social media monitoring, we were talking about that earlier, that's big on our business because what are people saying about our company? We need to know what they're saying about us. And an automated system for cybersecurity, that is crucial. Because if you don't have the automated, you're not going to survive. Okay, more programs matured in 2022 with less newcomers to the discipline. That's a challenge because I'm not seeing as many younger faces coming in. That's a challenge. So sorry you have to take off. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up real quick because we got raffle prizes. We got gifts to give away. So let's see. Key lessons, here we go. Be prepared for the unexpected. Cybersecurity has been a top risk, but it has now entered a new dimension, chronic versus acute. Taking a chronic approach to risk is gaining traction, particularly for longer-term threats such as climate change. Adoption and use of standards is rising as management becomes more aware. What do you think? Did it pretty much track to what you thought it would? To read the report, there's a lot more in the report. I can't encourage you enough. thebci.org. Sign up, if you're not a member, at least sign up for a free web account, and then you can get in and download the report. Yes.
So Nationwide's a NIST-based organization, so everything that we do from a cybersecurity and business continuity and resiliency perspective is based off of NIST.
Yeah.
Would you be able to tell me what the ISO standard might bias that NIST doesn't?
For a US-based company, not much. NIST is very intense from us. Yeah. Information security, but it also has the robustness of an actual continuity program based into it, 800 something. Yeah, that one. I knew it was in that range. But for a US company, NIST, yeah, you're not going to get much different there. But if you're doing work globally, then it makes a big difference. Because NIST is not recognized as the standard outside of the US, because it's a US standard. ISO is international. So, all right, thank you. Oh,